At the intersection of technology, leadership, and human awareness, in today's episode, I'm joined by Aleks, also known as Astrologer Royale. In this conversation, we explore astrology not as entertainment, but as a tool for self awareness, timing, personal growth, and understanding human potential on a deeper level. We talk about purpose, free will, life direction, and whether our birth charts reveal patterns about the path we're naturally drawn towards in this lifetime. We also explore the intersection between astrology and AI, from pattern recognition and intuition to whether technology could one day interpret charts, and why human awareness may still remain essential in an increasingly automated world. Let's start. Thank you so much for being on the show, Aleks. I like to start off with just a bit of your journey and where you are, who you grew up, and what your early years were like, just to kick off the show.
Yeah. So my name is Alexandra Trejo. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I've been a practicing astrologer for over 20 years now. And I grew up with astrology. So,
Mm,
so
love
my
that.
childhood years were spent, like nose like straight in the books because my grandfather was an amateur astrologer.
Ah.
And so my grandparents lived in a marshy, swampy area a couple hours north of Toronto. And so whenever I
Mm.
would go to visit them, part of me played outdoors a lot, and I'd go chase after frogs and that kind of thing. And then the rest of the time, I would go and steal my grandfather's astrology books, and I would go into the spare bedroom where all the snacks were. And
I
I
love
was
that.
a particularly happy camper.
Wow. And in terms of astrology, it's been exists for thousands of years, right? So
Yeah.
what made you realize that it could be used as like a serious tool for understanding human potential rather than just for entertainment?
So here's the interesting thing. Astrology only became entertainment, I'd say, in the 1970s.
Ooh, wow, that's not a long time
Prior to
ago.
that, yeah, well, but also not so long if we look at, the totality of its history, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the origin of astrology was that it was actually used for royalty, for military leaders,
Oh,
for
wow.
people of consequence, basically. And its origin was to actually help leaders make decisions, to
Mm.
understand potentials. Because I mean, especially if we take ourselves back, a couple thousand years ago, so much of our lives was dictated by the conditions of the earth, right?
That's so true. Yeah, yeah.
And even though my practice is not weather astrology, weather astrology was a large part of how astrologers guided leadership, thousands of years ago. Because if you weren't properly prepared for whatever the season was going to bring, then that meant people dying, rioting,
Mm,
civil unrest,
mm.
right? Or if conditions were favorable, well, you could organize yourself well so that you could, really reap and harvest as much as you can because there's always going to be lean times. And
Mm.
and of course, astrologers also guided, leadership in terms of, what we would call economics today,
Mm-hmm.
as well as forging alliances, whether or not to go to war, all
Mm.
of these things that, even the potential for famine or for plagues or that kind of thing. And
Wow.
so astrology was always a serious tool.
Mm.
And even if you go back and read astrology books, Jay, that are from like the 1920s and the 1930s, they are all written by highly educated people.
Mm,
And the way they speak, the way they explain things, how they go back to original source materials, astrology was always something serious. But in the 1970s, with the New Age movement that happened back then, right?
mm-hmm,
Hippies and all of that, um, marketing really got its hands in astrology.
mm,
And what was something that was really meant to provide depth of guidance was how do I explain this? They took it and they turned it into something superficial
mm,
so that they could
mm-hmm.
mass market.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And and I understand why that happened. If you're really working with astrology, Jay, you want to use your natal chart.
Mm,
However, in the 70s, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have apps. So it's not like most people actually had the capacity to go and calculate their own chart. That's
mm-hmm,
asking too much of somebody for a subject that they don't know anything about, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
understand why it went that way. However, it's kind of become, I guess you could say, lost in translation, that there
Mm,
is greater depth to it than simply just your zodiac sign that you read in your horoscope, or all the zodiac themed books that are, on the shelves of, major book retailers and that kind of thing.
mm. If someone is interested in astrology, but they're only aware of, their star sign, but if they want to go into the depth of it, what would be the first step that they should do?
Well, you know what? Honestly, I would actually recommend that they take some kind of class. Now there are some, a couple of books on interpreting your natal chart, and so and of course those have more depth than your standard, this is your
Mm-hmm.
zodiac sign, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the first step is to get your chart, and that's really easy. You can, like, there's apps that you can enter all your birth details into, and it will produce a chart for you. There are websites you can go and print it out, and then from there, go and start educating yourself and get a
Mm,
feel for it. I mean, you can
mm.
always consult an astrologer. I
Of
do
course,
natal
yeah.
charts, of course. Um, but there's also something to be said about calculating it yourself, taking a look at it, thinking about what's being presented to you, seeing the context of how it applies in your life. There's a certain
Mm,
magic to that. That was a lot of my own childhood, was looking
mm,
into my own natal chart. I was 10 years old when I first cast my own chart. Um,
mm.
y- you know,
Mm,
and it's so much easier now than it was when I was 10 years old. I had to use what's called an ephemeris. And so I took, the natal positions of the planets and where they were at during my birth. And then I had to go and do the math to calculate, what my ascendant was, or rising sign. And
mm.
so all of these things, really required a
Yeah,
significant amount of
yeah,
math from me,
yeah, of
right?
course, yeah, yeah, yeah. And for someone, for listeners who are not aware of, what's the difference between astrology and fortune telling? Like,
So, first of all, there's two main branches of astrology
mm,
that most people are aware of. So you have what's called the natal or horoscopos, which is
mm-hmm,
your natal chart,
mm-hmm.
which really is an exploration of the development of your potential.
Okay,
So
okay.
your natal chart is not a limiter.
Mm-hmm,
It is actually a map of where you could go.
mm-hmm,
Because you could take the same natal chart and give it to two different people. And depending on their will and desire to accomplish in life and their willingness to face themselves,
mm-hmm.
they can end up in two very different places.
Wow,
And,
okay.
and so someone who really is willing to do that inner work can embrace more and more of the higher gifts of their chart,
Mm-hmm.
versus someone who's not willing to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that aspect to it. And then the fortune telling piece is more so in what's called forecasting or predictive astrology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way that I work with astrology, because I work primarily with businesses, I help entrepreneurs, plan out and strategize, their business in the coming year, as an example. And it's not just fortune telling. I'm not sitting there
Mm-hmm.
telling my clients, you're going to book 50 new people within the next
Mm.
3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
that. So astrology creates cycles of opportunity.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
That's how I would describe it.
Mm.
And when you look at fortune telling, you sit down in front of, say, well, I don't even want to call them a tarot reader because even tarot is not supposed
It,
to work this way. But you sit down in front of that fortune teller, and and they're telling you, well, your husband's going to pass away at such and such an
yeah.
age, and you're going to be
Yeah.
left a widow,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and all of these things, and these are things that I can paraphrase from, clients who've come back and repeated this to me. And astrology it's not fatalistic.
Mm. Mm.
It's not, this is going to happen to you and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm.
It's, these are the winds of opportunity. This is how they're blowing. Are you going to put out your sail so that they can help carry you forward?
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's how it works. So when I work with entrepreneurs, as an example, when, let's say, well, let's say that they have aspects to Saturn in the chart of their business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Saturn governs over like business resources, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so that can include supplies, if they're working in a product-based business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give the example of a product-based business. So they have aspects to Saturn happening. Well, this is a really good time to revisit all of your suppliers
Mm. Okay.
and to forecast, like to really look at your needs, because let's say that you have positive Saturn aspects happening. Well, this might be a time to check in and either renegotiate with your suppliers because maybe you can get a better deal, or
Mm.
it might be time to reach out and to diversify
Mm.
your supply network so that you have more resources at your disposal pending, something happening to your current supplier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
understanding that you're in a cycle of opportunity where you can take a look at, as an example, the supply aspect of your business, because this is part of what Saturn is indicating, then this is something to take advantage of, right? And now Saturn is also things like key equipment and processes and the
Mm.
manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
aspects, right? And so these are all areas to look at and to see what you can work with, because maybe there's ways that you can streamline things because the energy is favorable to do that, right?
Mm. So
And and
yeah.
oh
So
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So in order to so basically it's your astrological blueprint, and each person has their own seasons, and during those seasons you might be best able to harvest particular things, based on where your stars are aligned on your blueprint. So in order to take the best advantage of or to understand your season, how when we go to say uh, when a listener goes to a say this online, they can read the chart and they read in their birth chart, but from an online reader, but then they'll be able to understand where, okay, this is where mine, say my rising is in Aries, or like my sun is this. And so from that, how do they get to understand the seasons of their lifetime? or seasons of the astrological patterns?
So the predictive aspect is different. And
Uh-huh.
so that's where you would have to look into what are called, there's different methods of forecasting. So the two
Mm.
main branches of forecasting are what are called transits, and
Mm,
then what's
okay.
also called secondary progressions. And so when you
Uh-huh.
look at the transits and secondary progressions, that is what gives you that insight into the coming seasons that you can harvest different energies or harvest different things. I really like that you expressed it that way, Jay,
Mm,
because
mm,
there's always opportunity. And for so many of us, and especially for entrepreneurs, we often get focused on how do I describe this? Like on the marketing, right?
mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm,
always about the marketing, it's always about bringing new people in. And that's not the only aspect of your business. So when you maintain awareness of all areas and you are growing and developing on all fronts,
mm-hmm,
you can really become a real powerhouse.
mm,
And this is also true for us as human beings.
mm-hmm,
So to give you an example, Jay, when someone has positive aspects to Venus in their chart, well, Venus is the goddess of love and relationships.
mm-hmm,
And if you're in a relationship, well, then maybe it's time for you to check in and to see, what's happening within your own heart. Are there
mm,
things that you can clean up? Are there past traumas and
mm,
baggage that you can let go of,
mm,
right? Or is it simply a time to go and make memories with your loved ones?
mm, mm-hmm.
Because sometimes astrology reminds us to do that too.
Yeah, and I also feel like because I'm really into like I'm a pro with astrology, so like as in like I love astrology. So basically, what I normally do is I would actually read my own chart and try to understand. So it's also like it helps me understand myself better. So I'm like, I'm acting this way. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So then I read into my chart. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So like you can kind of like understand yourself better by reading your chart.
Yeah. And the key is not to stop there because
Mm,
for the parts that are good, right, where you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now I get why. Okay,
mm,
wonderful.
mm-hmm,
But what about the times that it explains the things that aren't so great?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
The key is not to stop there.
mm,
So astrology can reveal our predispositions to to behavior,
mm,
right? And
mm-hmm,
and and
mm-hmm,
really that's a description of our energy or our essence. So as an example, Jay, if you are someone who is fiery in nature, right? Well, one of the beautiful things about fire is that it is passionate, it is
mm-hmm,
warm, it is active, right? However, it has aspects that aren't as positive as well.
mm-hmm,
Fire can be destructive,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it can be conflictive. So, do we just look and go, oh, well, yeah, sometimes I have a bit of a temper, but you know what?
mm-hmm,
It's because I'm a fire sign, right?
mm-hmm.
No, no, we have to step beyond that
Yeah.
and learn how to control that fiery nature.
Hmm.
It's not enough to just um, be okay with something that doesn't serve you, but because it's your zodiac sign or where the moon is or your ascendant, it's not okay to just accept that. If it's really causing damage in your life, why would you accept that?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So is it like, say, we have an astrological blueprint, but also we also do have a free will to be able
Exactly.
to change if we're not, happy with a certain aspect of a sign.
Absolutely. The origin of astrology, Jay, comes from Hermes Trismegistus, who's said to have lived 6 to 8 thousand years ago. And Hermes Trismegistus really believed in the majesty, of the human spirit.
Mm.
And he wrote that we are destined to become greater than the gods.
Wow, I
And
love that.
astrology, yeah, astrology um, is the pathway to that development. So
Mm,
it never
mm-hmm,
was meant to be a limiter, nor was it meant to be an explanation or an excuse. When you're really walking the path of astrology, because like astrology really is a path. If you're really working with it, um, it is a path of self-discovery, of development, of growth, of self-mastery.
mm, mm-hmm,
And you are meant to master your chart. And mastering your chart means two things. The first thing is that it means really grasping the gifts that are in your chart, embracing
mm-hmm,
them, and putting them in service to yourself and other people.
mm, mm-hmm,
The second thing is that it means mastering the aspects that can be expressed through what's called the ego, right? So we talk about free will. And Jay, have you ever felt, like there's a conflict in yourself, like the angel and devil on the
of
shoulder,
course, yeah, of course,
right?
all the time.
So the thing is, that astrology, that astrological energy comes in, and parts of it get expressed through the angel,
Uh-huh. Wow.
but then parts of it get expressed through the ego, that devil on the other shoulder. And so embracing your gifts and putting them out there in service to yourself and others, that is embracing the angel.
Mm,
And minimizing the negative aspects, or mastering those negative aspects, is basically taking control of that devil and making sure that it's not controlling your life.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So basically, it's like you have your strength and your weaknesses. So based on, like, say, if you're honing into a more um positive aspect of it, that means you're feeding to the better wolf. And if you're feeding into your weaknesses, that is a bad wolf that you're feeding into.
Yeah. And in spirit, astrology is all positive. It's all
Mm,
the angel.
mm,
And that's when you walk that path of development, um, that's what you're doing,
mm,
is you are becoming that angel. You are feeding, the light wolf.
mm. And do you know, there's a lot of people, and many people talk about finding the purpose, or, like, the North Star, right? We're always aiming towards the North Star. So do you believe our birth charts reveal something about the path that we are meant to walk in this lifetime?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I do want to say something about purpose though, because a lot of people have this notion that purpose is supposed to be like grandiose
Mm,
and
yeah, yes.
like almost like a company mission statement.
Yeah, it is a mission statement, yes.
And that it's singular in nature.
Mm,
Purpose is there's so many components to purpose. So, as an example, your parents are part of your purpose and you're part of theirs. Your
mm,
children,
mhm,
same thing.
mhm, mm,
Family in general. Can your career be part of your purpose? Maybe. It
mm,
might
mhm.
also be something that where you deviated from your purpose,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And your partner in life, are they a part of your purpose? Most likely,
Mm, mhm,
and vice versa.
mm, mhm.
Purpose is not, that company mission statement. I am here to, XYZ.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I am here to heal the world of cancer. That's not a singular person's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's a team effort.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is that, in those visions of grandeur, right? A lot of people often forget that there are many people who have the same or similar
Oh,
aspects of
as
purpose
that.
that we
Yeah.
share together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're not these, I mean, we can be superheroes. However, none of us is like, the world's savior. It's so important for us to realize that to really make change in this world, probably there are many people who have a similar purpose.
Mm,
And when we work together, that's when we can accomplish it.
mm. And as an astrologer, can you help people understand when they are aligned with their path versus when they're pushing against it based on reading the chart?
Absolutely. But do you want to know something funny, Jay? A lot of times people already know.
Oh, wow.
So, have you ever heard of the term cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. So, for anybody who's experiencing cognitive dissonance in their life right now, which is basically the difference between what it is versus what you want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
the greater the difference, the more likely you are deviating off of your path.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, most of the time, I don't need to tell my clients that that's happening. They already know, they already feel it. And it's probably like 90% of the time, Jay, it's part of why they've reached out to me.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, right? Like otherwise, if you don't have that, right? Like if you're so sure of yourself, then you know already, right?
Totally, totally.
And do you like as you mentioned earlier, right? Astrology is a part of the aspect of astrology is about timing. So can understanding cycles help people make better decisions and also like we will mention it earlier that in order for them to find out about the timing, they can read into the chart and look into it. Um, yeah, like if you have like any other ways for a listener to understand how they can find out about the timing, are you willing to share it?
Yeah. So, first of all, cycles are massively important. Even our own behavior has cycles.
Mm.
I'm sure you've heard of the term having your buttons pushed, Jay.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Well, having your buttons pushed is an example of a cyclical behavior.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because if I push this button, I can watch sequentially what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding cycles within the self, right? And of course, as an example, there are healthy cycles and there are unhealthy cycles.
Yeah.
So your buttons are examples of unhealthy cycles.
Mm-hmm.
However, let's say that you have mastery over cooking. Well, there's a cyclical behavior, right? Because okay, before I cook, I'm going to do my prep. I'm going to get everything out. I'm going to get, everything I need ready. And, and I know how to put things together, right? So that can be an example of a positive cyclical
Mm.
behavior. So we always want to observe those cycles within ourselves. And yes, of course, you understand that through the natal chart,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's also important to understand those in context to larger cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say, as an example, that uncertainty pushes your buttons and you're about to enter into a period of uncertainty.
Aha.
How are you going to handle that? But if you know ahead of time, okay, I don't like uncertainty, but that's where I'm heading. maybe I can embrace this as a time to heal my relationship with uncertainty
I
and
love that.
not
Yeah.
allow it to
Yeah.
be doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertainty just means I don't know, doesn't mean that it's bad or negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be a time where you conscientiously work on that.
Mm. And I have this like example of one of the app that I have previously used. I don't know if you've heard of the pattern.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember like looking at the pattern and some of the things, right? Like it makes sense of like your behaviors and things like that. And then you can actually do the chart for your like partner or see like if there's friction between you and things like that. But then there's also the rhythm of your life, which you like I started looking into that, but then some of the messages that I've received from those patterns is sometimes it can be quite jarring and negative. So then I just ended up like, I'm not gonna look at this anymore.
So this was why I kind of didn't mention a lot of the apps.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of fear-based language
Mm-hmm.
in in a lot of those things. Um, and so I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of apps out there. To be
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I have to call out my industry. There often is a lot of either victim-based language or fear-based language as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I really want to educate people in astrology.
Yeah.
And I just find that the apps kind of lead people into that place of um, astrology being a limitation
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to something that frees you,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it's meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use the apps because if you don't know how to calculate those transits and secondary progressions and that kind of thing, they're wonderful for it. But what you do is you read it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath the fear-based language, what are the key themes that you're picking up here? So if it's um, you know things are going to happen in your relationships, it's like, okay, it's saying things are going to happen in my relationships. Well, how am I going to look at my relationships right now?
Mm-hmm.
How can I examine and conduct them from a balanced place? Because if
Mm-hmm.
things are happening in my relationships, it's because they're unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how am I going to restore balance in my relationships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the astrology has always been about recognizing patterns in human life. So AI today is also built on pattern recognition through data. So do you see any parallels between these two ways of understanding the world?
You know, this is such an interesting question. Um, AI is so interesting because, truth be told, it can be quite insightful, right? It is,
Mm-hmm,
based
mm-hmm,
on pattern recognition. However, when it comes to astrology, I would say that it's a great reference tool. I would not call it a good interpretive tool.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, just the other day, I asked, I asked AI, can you pull up, the rest of the full moons for the year for me, right?
mm-hmm,
And so it lists all the dates out for me. Thank you, AI. You're wonderful, right?
mm,
So I love using it for, for things like that, right? As a reference, it's wonderful. But when it comes to interpretation, there's a couple of things that I'm not so much a fan of.
mm-hmm,
And there's things that I find that it just can't do. So the first thing is that it's always agreeable.
It is, yeah. It's very biased, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, in my work as an astrologer, sometimes I need to challenge my clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? My job is not to agree with everything they say or do. I'm not helping them grow if that's the case, right? And so, AI is preset to basically agree with you. And, for somebody who is firmly listening to the devil on one
Mm,
shoulder, that's not helpful,
mm-hmm.
right? So that's one of the things. The other thing is that your astrology grows and evolves.
Oh.
So if you have talent, say, for example, in communication, well, often that begins in person-to-person communication, right? So interpersonal
Mm-hmm.
communication.
Mm-hmm.
However, it doesn't stop there because that communication could be teaching, could be speaking to groups, could
Mm-hmm.
be writing one day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the context in which those gifts are being applied matters.
Mm.
And unless you're sitting down and inputting all of that into the AI, well, it's not going to do that. It's going to scrape what it finds off the internet, which by the way is really not a great source for most of astrology to begin with,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
You already talked about the fear-based kind of
Languages,
descriptions
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
languages, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's what AI is pulling from.
Mm-hmm.
So, the internet source material, sorry, not great.
Mm,
And
mm,
if that's the source material that AI is pulling from, well, then that's also not going to make interpretation great as well. So,
mm,
so like I said, like I really love it for, pulling together references, right? When's the next full moon or what lunar phase are we in right now? When's the next Mercury retrograde? Asking it questions like that, that's great. It
mm-hmm.
saves you time. It can help keep you aware. Those are wonderful things. Um, but when it comes to interpretation, it just can't touch you in the same way that someone looking you in the eyes and speaking from the heart can. It cannot
Mm,
do that.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you see astrology as a way of reconnecting people with meaning and purpose, in a world that is becoming like increasingly very technological?
That's a really good question. Our world is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for the last 20 years, I've studied with the Modern Mystery School, and we talk about this concept of having entered into a new paradigm.
It is right now,
So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
in 2021, we crossed this threshold and we've entered into this new paradigm, and things really have been changing drastically since then. And then of course with Pluto entering into Aquarius, which very much coincided with the emergence of AI,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had this acceleration in what's become possible from what you can ask of your phone or your computer or what have you, right? So there are going to be a lot of people who need to find meaning and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That of course there's the fear behind AI and how it's going to replace jobs.
Yeah.
There's there's the the fear of AI becoming oh my gosh, what was it called in the Terminator movies? The Skynet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a tool
Mm,
and it's not going anywhere.
mm, mm,
Is it changing what our world looks like? Yes, yes, it is.
mm,
And mean, even look at how many people are using AI to construct illusions,
Mm.
right? Deep fakes and all that thing. So with this advent, there's a couple of possibilities that I see. And so one is that some people will become completely swept in it and kind of engage in that illusory world.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are others who, are going to be seeking the meaning despite that, who see through illusion. Uh,
Mm.
I should make reference to this really amazing Japanese anime here called Ghost in the Machine, right? And so that anime was, oh my gosh, when was it? Late 90s, early 2000s. And it was all about the integration of humans with technology.
Wow.
Really amazing anime if you want to watch it,
I would
but
love to watch it.
that was the exploration, was where does the human spirit fit into um, our increasing relationship with technology.
Mm-hmm.
In that anime, you have humans who still have a human brain, but a cyborg body. How does
Mm.
it change identity? How does it change how we experience life? Right. And so those are all questions that are asked, and can we even trust our own eyes anymore?
Mm. Mm.
Right. Those were things that were explored. It was so brilliantly written and really ahead of its time. It's so relevant,
Wow.
actually.
Mm.
Um, so can astrology help us with those things? Yeah.
Mm.
At the core of who we are, there's always certain answers we need in our life. We need to know who we are,
Yeah.
where we came from, where we're going. We have to have a sense of direction.
Mm.
And astrology is a really powerful tool that can help us either find that when we've lost it
Mm.
or
Mm-hmm.
help us strategize when we know where we're headed.
Mm. And if someone is feeling like, for say someone's feeling lost in their life, can we explore their birth chart and then understand how to redirect their life?
Yeah, there's a couple of things when I encounter that situation.
Mm.
Um, I always like to look at transits that are happening, and because I often ask them, how long have you been feeling this way?
Mm.
That feeling may be the product of a transit bringing up some form of cognitive dissonance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or it could be a time of subconscious release, right? That and not necessarily even cognitive dissonance. Maybe they love their life. It's just that there's a lot of subconscious release going on, and so because they are experiencing those negative emotions as they release them, that they presume that they're unhappy with their life and that they've been
Mm.
knocked off track, and that may not
Mm.
necessarily be the case, right?
Mm. Mm.
So I always ask how long they've been experiencing this.
Mm.
And I take a look at the transits and the secondary progressions that are happening so that I can see if this is a timing event, or if it's something that is genuine from within them.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And, so after that, I always go to the natal chart again, but I always like to see what kind of cycles they're in so that I can also understand how to guide them.
Mm.
If they're in a place where like let's say, for example, it's their Saturn return. Well, that's a time of confronting the self,
Uh-huh.
being honest with yourself. What did I accomplish? And also, where did I kick myself in the behind?
Mm.
Right? And that Saturn return also has a tendency to make people be a little too self-critical.
Mm-hmm.
So, if someone's coming to me feeling like they're off their path and they're in the middle of their Saturn return, well, I'm not going to go and tell them, oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to help you look at yourself in a more balanced way.
Uh-huh.
I want you to tell the truth about yourself. And whenever I say that, the first thing is they start listing off all the negative things, right? And I'm like, no, 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 no,
Mm.
no. That's not the truth. That's
Yeah.
only half the story.
Yeah.
What about where you did right and
Mm.
what to build on,
Mm.
you
And
know?
you were mentioning about the Saturn return earlier. How long does the Saturn return last for? What's the duration of it? And how can listener find out about whether they're going through that period or not?
Yeah. So there's varying accounts as to the length of the Saturn return. So, Jay, some people say that the minute Saturn enters the sign that you had it in at birth, which basically happens around 27 and a half years old, give or take, depending that you're in your Saturn return. And that's really a loose kind of time frame. So the Saturn return happens around 29 and a half years old, give or
Okay.
take, depending on
Mm.
retrogrades and that kind of thing. And the intensity of it, generally it's 3 months.
Okay.
However, most people generally have a second round of it because of
Uh-huh.
Saturn, moving into retrograde motion and then coming out and reactivating. So, in odd cases, sometimes Saturn is in the perfect spot where he activates, he retrogrades, stops, reactivates. So, um, basically, I would say that from 29 and a half to 30 and a half is
Mm-hmm.
the window or the time frame in which you're going to experience it
It's for any person.
for any person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be that entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be, like I said, generally that 3 month period where it gets a little bit intense. And
Mm.
that's okay. We need that.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah.
to go through that self-evaluation to be honest with ourselves and to really look at what we've accomplished over the last 30 years and to redirect ourselves as we move into the next 30 years, right?
Mm.
So that's the first time the Saturn return happens. And of course, we get it again around age 59,
Uh-huh. Okay. Yep. Yep. It's like a 30-year
and
cycle kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah. And then if we're lucky enough, we get it again around 87, 88.
Uh-huh. Wow. And do you also have any daily practices that help you stay aligned with your own path?
Oh my gosh, yes. Um, Although I will say they're astrological and yet not.
Mm.
Um, so, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an initiate of the Modern Mystery School. I've been
Mm.
working with them for 20 years. I'm also an international instructor of astrology there. And uh, part of my studies with the Modern Mystery School have been about really keeping energetic alignment. And so I have energetic practice that I do every day. I do it morning and evening to keep myself in alignment because um, none of us is, without that little devil on the other shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So uh, the thing is, I don't want negativity to govern my life. So the energetic tools that I use protect my energy field so that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not absorbing and taking on the emotions and negativity of others. And also so that I can recognize when I'm the one who's negative,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, and then also, there's meditation practice. That's part of what I do as well. And even just bringing in the light and calling in those astrological forces to be part of my life.
Mm.
What most people don't understand about astrology is that, the old astrologers were well, number one, they were often some of the most educated people in the kingdom. Number two, they were magicians.
Wow.
So if, an energy was needed and it wasn't available in a cycle, then the astrologer called it in.
Mm. Wow.
They created a relationship to all the zodiac signs, to all the planets, so that if something's not available, they could summon it, because we have a relationship to all of them.
Mm. Mhm.
Some of those relationships are innate, easy. Others, it takes diligent practice to acquire.
Mm.
But we need all the planets, we need the powers of all 12 of the signs. They all hold value for us. And
Mm.
so through that energetic practice and by connecting to the planets and the signs and the elements, that's how I build my life. That's
I
how I
love that.
manifest joy. That's how I manifest success in my business. That's how I
Mm.
serve other people. It's also how I become more understanding and accepting of the people who are part of my life,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
value them instead of judging them.
Mm. And where can people learn more about your work?
Well, I'd be honored to share astrology with anyone who's interested in learning.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they can find me on my website, astrologerroyale.com.
Mhm.
And I also have a free ebook while you're there
Mhm.
called Star Powered Resilience. And it's actually a zodiac inspired guide to understanding your gifts and strengths, as well as how stress impacts and mitigates your performance. But there's also tools and tips and tricks to help you overcome stress.
Mm. And before we wrap up the show, what is one truth about you that you stand by?
I believe in the goodness of humanity.
Mm.
Even when we show the ugliest parts of ourselves, the most painful parts of ourselves, the most ridiculous parts of ourselves, at the core of everything, every one of us has a heart.
Mm.
We want
Yes.
to love and be loved.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so we are innately good.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that.